Okay, so I have a question. As you know, because you know all, I just finished reading the book of Yehoshua. That's Joshua to all you Constantinian sun worshippers and Greek Delta pledges out there. And in the book of Joshua, we see the first major declaration of faith that results in true power. Joshua is in pursuit of the Amorites, and he does not consult, he does not kneel and offer mealy-mouthed supplications. He simply says, sun, stop, moon, freeze. And the deal is done. So my question to you is this. In order for us to attain that level of faith that can be transformed into power at your discretion, of course, would it not be safe to then say that to achieve this, step one is to be in alignment with your will, and being in alignment with your will means being in alignment with your instructions, living our lives accordingly, understanding that there are still a great many things that we don't have answers for yet, but that we do have a baseline that has been there forever, and that by aligning ourselves to that, and also by understanding, accepting, and believing upon your Son, our Master and Mashiach, Yeshua, again, Jesus to all you Romans and Greek heathens out there, I love it. By doing those things, that in time, through obedience and discipline and just application, that we too can amass this kind of power and display it, use it when need be, at your discretion, of course. Am I swinging a gutter ball here, or am I rolling a strike? You heard him. Roll it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Time for Truth. I am J.C. Williams, your irascible instigator and host. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at three different things. I promised you a bit of a truncated version of the science behind the chronology of the Chronological Gospels. And we're also going to take a brief look at the feeding of the 5,000, simply because that occurs 3 days after this episode will air. And then we're going to get into something that I consider to be the most important part of this episode. For some of you, this is going to come as a major bombshell, and you will get no apologies from me or the Father or Messiah for it. It is what it is. So let's get right to it. I'll see you in a second. Welcome. So how did we get this chronology? How are we able to nail down to the exact day, month, week that these events have occurred? The major events are now nailed down to the exact day. How did this happen? Well, let me preface this by saying one thing first. Whether or not you believed or believe that the United States government took a little trip to the moon in 1969 is of no consequence here. Because at some point, whether via installation or via satellite, we were able to attain the ability to fire laser beams at mirrors either on or in orbit around the moon and measure the time and distance of those beams coming back, thus creating light speed equations. Okay, I won't do that anymore. So, once that data was made public, and this goes back to the days before supercomputers, when you had to have, like, the old school chalkboard that was as big as a room, or spreadsheets on the ground that made an old school construction estimator's book, look like a little micro notebook by comparison. But researchers, biblical researchers, such as my teacher, began plowing through this mathematical data with their Texas Instrument calculators and writing down the answers to these equations. The question, I think, the first thing that everybody's going to ask is, well, why the moon? Why is the moon important? Excellent question. The moon is important because the ancient biblical Hebrew calendar, the calendar that was established by Yehovah, by God, is based upon lunar cycles. It's based upon a new month starts with the sighting of the new moon. It has to be done by two witnesses, two pairs of eyes. The moon must be seen at a certain degree of illumination. You have to be able to see it. And then the new moon is declared and a period of a month ensues. There is one exception to this, and that is the first month of the year, the month of the Aviv. This is very, very important. I cannot stress how important this is. Pay attention. Okay. So, the first month of the year in the biblical Hebrew calendar occurs in the spring when the barley in the land of Israel is Aviv, when it's on that cusp of being ready to be harvested. This condition must be in effect. If the moon is sighted and the barley is not Aviv, then what is added is called an Adar Bet. It's an additional month. So, in order to celebrate the Passover, that barley has to be Aviv and the month must be correct. Now, how does this come into play with the chronology? Well, if we have the data on that, whether it was all written out and worked out with the Texas Instrument calculators and spreadsheets, eventually we came to a point where we had computers that were available either at university, which is, I'm sure, was the next step, or the home computer, which had enough processing power to run all that data forwards and backwards and get things locked down. So the question remains, what event occurs that all four gospel authors record in the New Testament, in the record of the ministry of Messiah, his 70-week, not 2.5 years, or 3.5, or whatever. So silly. Ridiculous. More on that as we go down the road. In any event, this is the occurrence that allows all of the gospel authors to be synchronized, to be locked in. And by doing so, we now have the 70-week ministry of Messiah verified 1,000% over, irrefutable, and we have that level of knowledge now that Daniel was told about, where men are running to and fro at speeds never before seen in the history of all the earth. And that's certainly a tie-in beyond transportation, technology as well. Information is transmitted in nanoseconds now. And so we get to benefit from this, and it changes a great many things. And so we're looking at the feeding of the 5,000 in this episode of Time for Truth, because this occurs exactly 3 days after this episode airs. Now, before we get into that, let me say that upon revisiting, I should say, and I've lost count of my reading cycles. I finished the book of Yehoshua 2 days ago. If you asked me how many times I've read it, I couldn't say. But I can tell you this, the note-taking process has become a lot more detailed because there's, eventually you're in this long enough, you're going to figure out how the Almighty communicates to you. And you're only going to get this by putting in the work. So put in the work. And let's put in the work and move on to the feeding of the 5,000, the Truth Buffet for the 5K. I will see you there. All right, here we are, the feeding of the 5,000. Now, let me preface this by saying that after revisiting this, long story short, what we've got here is basically Sermon on the Mount 2.0, but beyond that, this is also yet another test of faith of the disciples. We had the first mass feeding, right? Yeshua says, you feed them. He's testing them. He's wanting to see. Peter, come on, join me. Walk on out here. Take a step, into the raging sea. Has to be pulled up. So it's not quite there yet. This is why we had the reference to Joshua at the beginning of the program, because for obvious reasons, these guys are being slowly schooled and brought in to understand that what they're involved in here is very real, and that they need to take it very seriously. But there's still some lingering doubt. And, this goes back to something I've said many times over about human nature. It does not change. I've said it 1,000,000 times. I'll say it 1,000,000 more. Everything you want to know about human nature, you can read in the Exodus. Everything you want to know about power, the nature of power, the corruption of power, absolute power, and its devastating after effects, you can read in the Kings and the Chronicles. We don't change. Technology changes, systems advance, so on and so forth. New ideas, concepts, and philosophies may be introduced over time, but our nature as human beings does not change. Now, my dad, he's not a believer, and he will be the first to tell you this is one of the philosophical agreements that we are both 100% in line with, you know. But I can understand why he feels the way that he does, because he grew up in that whole Billy Sunday era where you would have to be blind to not see the contradictions piled upon each other to the high heavens, things that made this faith just not make any sense. You know, I'm not going to go into the full history of all of this, but the short version of it as it relates to what I'm trying to convey to you is that when you take this faith and you dress it up in a bunch of sprung out of Babylon sun god worship, where you're putting, you know, the sun discs over the head of Messiah, and you're making angels look, let's just say, artfully creative, as opposed to what they really are, which, you know, I could tell you some stories, but let's just put it this way. If most people saw an angel, they would be scared to death. Now, Yohanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, you Greeks and Romans out there, his father was serving in the temple. Yohanan ben Zechariah, sorry, a little mistake on my part there. He saw an angel from a distance, and that was enough to make him go, whoa, wait a minute. You know, he didn't have one tapping him on the shoulder. You get that tap on the shoulder, you're not going to forget it for the rest of your life. So, it's about the testing of faith. And again, here in the feeding of the 5,000, the faith is tested. Again, Yeshua says, you feed, or how much do you have? He's testing them. We have, the correct answer is whatever we need. But you're not going to hear that out of their mouths just yet. We see this time and time again. You know, even like I said, going back to the Exodus, can you imagine seeing the things firsthand with your own eyes that those sojourners, those Israelites, those children of Jacob saw, and still having the temerity to question Moses, to question the Almighty? Human nature, folks. It doesn't change. So let's touch on this very quickly. And if you have the Chronological Gospels, which you need to get, buy it. Links below. I tell you what, I'm the best spokesperson this book ever had. I don't even charge a fee, and I'm not going to charge a fee. I pay into the ministry because when you find, again, that special, precious gem, you sell everything, you buy the field. So we are looking at, the header's actually on page 134. We're going to be looking at page 135. This occurs on, according to the biblical Hebrew calendar, 28th day of the 6th month. I don't have the name of the 6th month in front of me at the moment. But you can get a copy of the biblical Hebrew calendar anytime you like at arootawakening.com. And there's a ton of good stuff over there. I mean, there's a great deal of teachings available there and at YouTube and, you know, the rest of social media. Go there and learn something, you know? Learn something, heathen. All right. So you can get a copy of that calendar. You can know. You subscribe, you'll know when the sighting of the new moon is, when the new month starts. You'll be able to correlate all of these things. I get that every month for free. You know, and there's other great stuff out there. Go see Dr. Jones. Go see Writing of God. You know, pay $10 a month to get the latest translations, not just of what we have in the Chronological Gospels, but they're working on stuff like Jude and James. You know, getting things in order, putting the house together, building upon what has been established. This is where this faith is at right now. We are in scholarship, folks. Tradition is gone. It's dead to us. The only traditions that we're going to uphold are the ones that God Almighty tells us to uphold. And we're going to follow his instructions, which are not grievous. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that we don't do anymore. We're not going to run to the quarry and pick up baseball-sized stones and start throwing them at people who don't fit the bill. Okay? When Yeshua came, he brought fullness to the instruction. And I'll give you a brief example of the most recent insight that I got on this. One of the commandments in the Torah is you are to offer the firstling of your flock to the Levites. It must be a perfect, blemish-free animal. It's set aside for them, right? Now, if you don't offer that, if you substitute that with a different animal because you want to hold on to that other, well, the other animal still has to be perfect. You don't shortchange God in any way, shape, or form. You know, that's one of the bedrocks of the Torah, of the instruction, of the commandments. But a part of that is that the animal that you held on to must be sacrificed. You can eat it, but it says that you are to give that to the poor. Well, what I came to sort of receive and to understand is that Yeshua would say, well, not only give it to the poor, but hold a banquet. Invite everyone. You know, if you're going to go all out. That's what fullness is. That's what that spirit is. So hopefully that will give you an idea, an understanding of how, you know, incidents such as, the woman that they drug out, you got writing in the sand, and of course they had violated the Torah anyway because they didn't bring the other guilty party. You know, when you accuse someone of adultery, how many does it take to tango? Right? Both parties have to be present. So they already had no real case to present to him. But he did not say, execute this woman. There's no way he was going to say that. He couldn't. He would have been in violation of the Torah himself. And he couldn't violate the Torah because he was the living Torah. He had to be the living Torah. Sin-free, blemish-free, perfection, in order to pay the atonement sacrifice, to pay the death penalty that was occurred at Sinai when, once again, human nature reared its ugly head. Moses can't even turn his back for 2 seconds without his brother being dragged into some pagan Egyptian cow party. So hopefully that will help you understand that we're not hardlining, rabbinical approaches to anything here. We're not exclusionary to anyone who truly wants to be not just a part of this, but who also understands that all of us, them, you, me, whoever, there are things about our lives and our behaviors, such as they may be, that we're going to have to correct. that in order to be better than that human nature, we have to rise above it. And Yeshua is there to help us with that. And we see that human nature played out over and over again during the time of his ministry. So, Thursday, September 18th, year 27 of the Common Era, or as my teacher calls it, the Common Error. Nonetheless, let's take a look at John 6:1, page 135 in the Chronological Gospels. And here we go. After the disciples reported concerning their ministry assignments, and they had just returned from being sent out, 2 by 2. And another thing real briefly here you have to understand as well. The disciples are the inner circle. But at this point, Yeshua has quite a number of people who are following him. Some stay, some fall by the wayside, but there are quite a few. And a lot of people got sent out. And this is where that account that we hear him say, and I saw Satan fall like lightning from the sky. A lot of people have interpreted that over the years as that was the fall. That's not the fall. What's happening there is that his disciples are out in the world, and apparently a pair of them have made some trouble to the enemy's plan. So he leaves the throne room and bam, down to earth to investigate, to see what's going on. And of course, the Father Yehovah rolls his eyes and says, "Thank me." They got a break from his 24/7 eternal yap, 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 yap accusing, which I'm sure even the flaming winged cherubim were very grateful to get. But I digress. Moving on. Okay. So the disciples reported concerning their ministry assignments. Yeshua crossed over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on those who were diseased. Then Yeshua went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. When Yeshua lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come to him, he said to Philip, here we go, "Where shall we buy bread so that these may eat?" And this he said to prove him, to prove them, for he knew what he would do, but he was curious as to what they would do. What are they going to say? Philip answered him, not the correct answer. 200 days' wages worth of bread is not sufficient for this crowd, that every one of them may take just a little. So Yeshua sighed. Here we go again. Take two. One of his disciples, Andrew, Shimon Kepha's brother, Simon Peter to you Greek and Roman heathens, thank you, said to him, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? Fail, Kepha, fail." Yeshua said, "Make the men sit down." There was a grassy area, so they sat the men down. They numbered about 5,000. Yeshua took the loaves, and when he had given thanks to Yehovah, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples distributed to those who were sitting down, and likewise they distributed the fish as much as the people wanted. When they were filled, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing will be lost." They gathered 12 baskets filled with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above all that was eaten. Those who had seen the miracle that Yeshua did said, and this is important, this is of a truth, the prophet that should come into the world. So the people that were present there, or at least a good vast majority who had some sense, recognized that the prophet, which Moses had spoken of, was in their midst. And the rules of the prophet, for those who do not recall, and which I will recite to you, Moses said unto the people of Israel, to the children of Jacob, there will come one after me. This prophet will not speak of himself, but will say only what the Father tells him to say. And when he speaks, you better shema. You better listen. And so these people who had just been fed, at that point, they knew it was time to listen. When Yeshua perceived, and this is important, when Yeshua perceived that they would come and take him by force and make him a king, he departed again into a mountain alone. Why? Because it wasn't time for him to reign as a king. The ministry of Yeshua is a covert mission. And just like the children of Jacob started out with 12 brothers, so did Yeshua have his 12 founders, his disciples. And the purpose of it all, twofold. Actually, more than twofold, threefold. First and foremost, the traditions of the politicians, the traditions of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes, the traditions of the religious politicians, the traditions of Pastor McToothie-Grin with his basketball arena and health and wealth prosperity doctrine had to be eradicated. Secondly, the death penalty incurred at Sinai had to be paid by the perfect offering, blameless, sinless, the living Torah, who brings fullness, fulfills the feast, does not fulfill or end the law or nail it to the cross and make Gentiles, the new chosen people, candy. God. And here I thought that woman was smart. That was the dumbest statement I've ever heard in my life. If you think that, then you're an idiot. If you think that, then you believe God can break his promises, which makes you an even bigger idiot. God doesn't break his promises. Israel are his children. We are that branch, that samach, that has been grafted into David, into that line. We get to enjoy the benefits of that, and that includes the instructions, the Torah, which is not grievous. Not every law or commandment in the Torah, 613, 614, according to some even less. Some of the sages think that others were double redundant. And then again, there are other factors as well. We're not an agrarian society anymore. We don't have a temple to go take sacrifices to be burned at. But, and this is just my estimation on that particular situation, we don't have to. We give our tithes, our 10%. You could see how the sages start to divert when it comes to getting what's owed them. And my teacher was right about a lot of things regarding these guys. One in particular springs to mind where a sage turns a tenth of a herd. The rabbis at this point, they are rabbis at that point when this particular sage was writing his ruminations, as it were. And that tenth of the herd was meant to go to the Levite towns for them and their families to live on it. Well, by this point, he had changed it into from a tenth to 10, and not even 10, but you would hold this scepter or rod or whatever it is and count as the cows walk by. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And on the 10th one, then that's the one you ship off, to the rabbis or whatever. Just the proclivities of men, right? So those are the two primary duties of the ministry of Messiah. The third is yet to come, and that's the fulfillment of the fall feasts, of which we will all be here. If you're still drawing oxygen, you're not going anywhere. That's a myth. Get it out of your head. And we're getting ready to blow another myth to bits. So keep these things in mind. There's a lot to this, but at the same time, once you remove the garbage from it, it becomes very straightforward, very easy to understand, and above all else, all of those contradictions are gone. Direct, confident, on point, as it should be. We got one more thing to talk about. I appreciate you sticking around, and I'll see you there. Thank you. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with me. This episode's gone a little bit longer than I would normally like it to, but we're going out on a bang. So, I told you I wanted to talk a little bit about the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, and why this is important. So let me lay a date on you. Thursday, September 26th, year 3 before the Common Era. That was the Feast of Sukkot, the year in which the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. You see, if you're watching this episode during my birthday, and I haven't made a big deal about it, and I'm not going to, because what Yeshua received for his birthday, shortly following that feeding of the 5,000, was his first actual perceived death threat from the Pharisees, not according to the Romans and the Greeks, which was later translated into the most hideous version of English ever created. And yes, I know you scholars out there live and die by the King James, and it has a storied and wonderful history, yes, but I've said it to many others, and I'll say it to you now. I consider it one of the enemy's greatest victories. that the be-all, end-all version of the Bible ended up in the most hideous version of the English language ever created. I would rather chew glass than read Elizabethan English. I got my fill of Shakespeare in high school, thank you. I am not an English lit major, and I have no interest in that whatsoever. But much like the Tanakh, the scholars of the King James will put in parentheses when they've added in something, or in the footnotes when something has been altered or is uncertain. And you will read in the Tanakh almost on every page, meaning of Hebrew uncertain, meaning of Hebrew uncertain. So, there's still a great deal of things that are yet to be straightened out. But again, when we have the baseline, the details are treasures to be discovered, and that will bring even greater fullness to the whole experience as we go. But because we have the baseline, we can free ourselves from the man-made religious institutions of our time, And as an interesting note, one person who shares that birthday, Thursday, September 26th, is a man some of you might know, Mr. Jim Caviezel. Yeah, that Jim Caviezel. That's his birthday too. Coinkydink? Yeah, I don't think so. So, authenticity is where you find it. Be it in scholarship or reflected in popular culture, everything is there if you know what to look for. Now, I don't have to be 10 plus years along in this to look at Pastor McToothygrin in Texas, or Skinbag Demon Minister wherever in the South Kenneth is located, to know that those guys, they're not of this. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward, such as it is. And if you're following that, you better get course corrected. You better get on board and start learning the truth of all this, because I tell you right now, the last place you want to end up is among a multitude so innumerable you can't count them, in the presence of a light so blinding that you can't see, and standing before a being that you're trying to plead your case to, and ultimately you're going to hear the worst thing you've ever heard in all of your known existence throughout time. I never knew you. But, think about the things that I never knew you. But, we cast out demons in your name. I never knew you. Michael, Gabriel, get them out. Show's over. You want to be that person? I don't. No. What I want to experience is, come up here. Come up here and be with me. Be with your family. Be with these people that you've been dying to talk to and to be with again since, you came to understand all these things. And since I put you on the case to root out all of that garbage, because that's what the watchmen do. We're the voice. And we're not stopping. I'm just one of many Baba Yagas of the world. And I'm coming for you, friendo. The target's on your back. And I don't care what happens to you. You know all this stuff. But those that you've misled, I'm going to pull as many of them away from you as I can. And I'm going to do it with the help of the real Messiah, Yeshua. So please, I'm asking you, if not through me, there are many others out there. Get on board. Start learning some things. Trust me when I tell you, in time, you're going to see and understand things in a way that you never could before. And as I always say, always, always remember. Mr. Gabriels, Mr. Bowie, take us to that heavenly roadhouse and let's get on out of here. I'll see you next time, and God bless. Thank you.